Chapter 19. Christmas in the German Way. The argument about breaking out of the Kessel in the second half of December also overlooked one curiously important psychological factor. Christmas was coming. No formation in the Wehrmacht was more preoccupied with the subject than the beleaguered Sixth Army. The quite extraordinary efforts devoted to its observance in bunkers below the steppe hardly indicated an impatience to break out. Lethargy from malnutrition combined with escapist daydreaming no doubt played a part, and probably so did the fortress mentality which Hitler helped to cultivate. But none of these entirely explain the almost obsessive emotional focus which the prospect of Christmas held for those trapped so far from home. Preparations began well before Hoth's Panzer Division advanced north to the Maischkova River, and never seemed to have slackened, even when the soldiers became excited by the sound of approaching gunfire. From quite early in the month, men started to put aside tiny amounts of food, not in preparation for a breakout across the snow, but for a Christmas feast or for gifts. A unit of 297th Infantry Division slaughtered a pack horse early, so as to make a horse sausage as Christmas presents. Advent crowns were fashioned from tawny steppe grass instead of evergreen, and little Christmas trees were carved out of wood in a desperate attempt to make it just like at home. The sentimentality was by no means restricted to soldiers. General Elder von Daniels decorated his newly dug bunker with a Christmas tree, and underneath, a cradle with a snapshot of his Kessel baby, born soon after their encirclement. He wrote to his young wife describing his plans to celebrate Christmas Eve in the German way, although in far-off Russia. The military group had certainly become the surrogate family. Each man sought to bring a little joy to another, he wrote after visiting his men in their bunkers. It was really uplifting to experience this true comradeship on the front line, one festive banner proclaimed. Comradeship through blood and iron, which, however appropriate to the circumstances, rather missed the message of Christmas. One person who certainly did not miss the message was Kurt Ruber, the doctor in the 16th Panzer Division. The 36-year-old Ruber, a theologian and friend of Albert Schweitzer, was also a gifted amateur artist. He converted his bunker in the steppe northwest of Stalingrad into a studio and began to draw on the back of a captured Russian map, the only large piece of paper to be found. His work, which today hangs in the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church in Berlin, is the Fortress Madonna, an embracing, protective, almost womb-like mother and child, joined with the words of St. John the Evangelist, light, life, love. When the drawing was finished, Ruber pinned it up in the bunker. Everyone who entered halted and stared. Many began to cry. To Ruber's slight embarrassment, no artist could have been more modest about his own gifts. His bunker became something of a shrine. There can be little doubt about the genuine and spontaneous generosity of that Christmas. A lieutenant gave out the last of his cigarettes, writing paper and bread as presents for his men. I myself had nothing, he wrote home, and yet it was one of my most beautiful Christmases, and I will never forget it. As well as giving their cigarette ration, men gave their bread, which they sorely needed. Others laboriously carved equipment racks for each other. On Christmas Eve, Ruber's pianist battalion commander gave his last bottle of sparkling wine to his soldiers in the sickbay, but just after all the mugs were filled, 4 bombs exploded outside. Everyone flung themselves to the floor, spilling all the sect. The medical officer grabbed his first aid bag and ran from the bunker to see to the casualties. 1 killed and 3 wounded. The dead man had been singing the Christmas carol, O du Fröhlich. The incident, not surprisingly, put an end to their celebrations. In any case, both the 16th Panzer and the 60th Motorized Infantry Division soon found themselves under full attack in the early hours of Christmas morning. The traditional and favourite song that night was Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, which soldiers sang with husky voices in bunkers by the light of hoarded candle stubs. There were many stifled sobs as men thought of their families at home. General Strecker was clearly moved when he made a tour of the frontline positions. It is a Stille Nacht amid a turmoil of war, a Christmas that shows the true brotherhood of soldiers. Visits by senior officers were also appreciated for their accompanying benefits. An NCO in a Panzer division recorded that the divisional commander gave us a swig from his bottle and a bar of chocolate. In positions which were not attacked, men crowded into a bunker which had a wireless to hear the Christmas broadcast of Großdeutsche Rundfunk. In their astonishment, they heard a voice announce, "This is Stalingrad," answered by a choir singing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, supposedly on the Volga front. Some men accepted the deception as necessary in the circumstances. Others were deeply angered. They felt it was tricking their families and the German people as a whole. Goebbels had already proclaimed that this should be a German Christmas, a definition intended to convey notions of duty and austerity, and perhaps already a way of preparing the nation for the news of the tragedy of Stalingrad. At 7 o'clock on Christmas morning, the 6th Army War Diary recorded, "No supply flights arrived in the last 48 hours, a slight exaggeration. Supplies and fuel coming to an end." Later that day, Paulus sent a warning signal to the Army Group Don to be passed back to General Zeitzler. "If we do not receive increased rates of supplies in the next few days, we must expect a greatly increased death rate through exhaustion." Although they realised that the snowstorms of the previous day must have hindered flying, they had not been informed that Badanov's tanks had stormed into the Tasinskaya airfield the previous morning. Manstein's headquarters did not even pass on the news that the Soviet counterattack with 4 armies against Hoth's panzer divisions and the Maishkova River had been launched. When 108 tons of supplies finally arrived on the 26th of December, 6th Army headquarters discovered that they had been sent 10 tons of sweets for Christmas, but no fuel.